What if I told you there's a 5-color deck that runs the best merfolk, slivers, ninjas, and even raccoons, and that doesn't even need its commander to be on the battlefield to win the game? The Dragon. Now before you think this is just another dragon deck, this build is something way more unique. This is what I like to call a tribal deck. Instead of just committing to one single creature type, we are playing some of the best tribal payoffs ever printed, and then using a bunch of changelings to get all of the benefits from those powerful tribal effects all at the same time. Because every changeling is an elf, a goblin, a dragon, a turtle, whatever we need it to be. The reason why I chose Dragon as a commander for this type of deck comes down to one single word: eminence. Meaning that even when Dragon is just sitting in the command zone, he will passively reduce the cost of any dragon spell we play by 1 generic mana. Now in a traditional dragon deck, this effect is already incredibly strong, but in this type of deck it is just absolutely ridiculous. Since all of our changelings are dragons, we will get a permanent passive cost reduction for them, without ever needing to be on the battlefield. And that's honestly the best part of this entire strategy, since our opponents won't be able to remove, counter, or interact with that cost reduction at all. We will get a constant advantage from the command zone without ever exposing our commander to any sort of removal. And that eminence ability alone would already be more than enough reason to use the Dragon as the commander for this deck. But on top of that, Dragon also has a really powerful late game ability. Whenever we get to 9 mana, which honestly isn't all that hard to do in this deck, we get to cast the Dragon. And whenever it is on the battlefield and any number of dragons would attack, we get to draw that many cards, and then we get to put a permanent card from our hand on the battlefield. As you can imagine, with a board filled with changelings, this ability gets out of control really quickly. It's not all that uncommon to draw like 4, 5, 6 cards whenever you resolve Dragon and attack with your changelings, while at the same time also getting the ability to cheat a massive permanent into play for free. So even though we rarely need to cast our commander, it is a late game win condition that will always be available to use from the command zone. Now to be fair, the Dragon is a really expensive card, and there are other 5-color commanders out there you can use for this type of strategy. You can use Reaper King if you want a really oppressive removal engine. You can use Cosmic Spider-Man and just stack a huge amount of keywords on your changelings, or you can use any of the really solid 5-color sliver commanders for this deck. But in my opinion, Dragon's eminence ability is just the strongest and most potent ability you can use for this type of deck. You can build this entire deck for about a €150 budget. That is, if we're not counting the price of the Dragon himself. This is easily one of the most unique decks that I've ever built, and it is way stronger than you'd expect it to be. Some of these card choices might seem really random at first, but by the end of the video you will see how everything comes together into one big synergistic tribal machine. As I do in all my videos, I will be going over every single card in the deck and explaining how it synergizes and why I decided to include it. This video is divided up into 5 categories: the tribal payoffs, acceleration, the changelings, support, and the lands. And let's get started by talking about the tribal payoffs. These are powerful value engines that normally only work in really specific tribal decks. But thanks to our changelings, we will consistently be able to trigger all of their insane effects. Now, one more thing before we dive into these cards. Yes, obviously we are playing a massive amount of changelings in this deck, and I will be covering them in a later part of the video. But I wanted to start with the fun part of the deck, the tribal payoffs that make this entire strategy work. Ayula, Queen Among Bears. Whenever another bear enters a battlefield under our control, we can either put 2 +1/+1 counters on a bear, or we can make a bear we control fight another creature. So now whenever a changeling enters the battlefield, we can either buff up another changeling, or whenever it is buffed up, we can make it fight any creature on the battlefield and use it as a really solid spot removal tool. And once you are able to start spamming multiple changelings in a single turn, this effect gets really oppressive, just removing any creature that your opponents might have on the board. And Ayula is the perfect example of the cards you are about to see in this video. It's a creature with a really potent ability that normally doesn't see any play outside of any specific bear tribal deck. But thanks to most of our creatures having all creature types, we will easily be able to trigger this ability. Cloud Shredder Sliver, a 2-mana sliver that will give all slivers we control, including itself, both flying and haste. And this is a really deadly combination of keywords. We will instantly be able to attack in the air with any changeling we play, just guaranteeing that we can get combat damage through, and we will also be able to use any sort of activated ability on the turn the creature comes down. As you will see later in the video, we do play a ton of cards that will allow us to tap our changelings for mana, and whenever you then have this sliver on the battlefield, it does set up for some really explosive plays. Hibernation Sliver. Whenever this card is in play, all slivers will get a new ability, and that is that you can pay 2 life to return this card to its owner's hand. Now this effect might seem pretty weird, but it is one of the strongest cards in the entire deck. Thanks to this creature, you can just keep paying life, bouncing changelings back to your hand and recasting them over and over again. And if you then have something like an Ayula on the battlefield, you will get a huge amount of value in the form of counter stacking or creature removal. And that's just one specific example. The fact that you can use this ability on instant speed makes it into a fantastic protection tool. Because if your opponents are using a spot removal spell on any of your creatures, or they are casting a board wipe, you can just pay the life, bounce the creatures back to your hand, your creatures won't be destroyed in the process, and you will be able to cast them again on a later turn. Dragon Tempest, a 2-mana enchantment that whenever any creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control will give it haste. Now since we are playing a couple of flying creatures in this deck, it is a nice little effect, but the best synergy is whenever you have this card on the battlefield and you do cast your Dragon, you will instantly be able to attack with it, dealing a massive amount of damage and allowing you to draw an extra card of his trigger. Now the main reason why this card is included in the deck is its second effect. Whenever any dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you get to ping X damage to any target, X being the amount of dragons you control. And with all of our changelings, the damage this little 2-mana enchantment will do over the course of the game is just absolutely crazy. Because let's say you do have 3 changelings on the battlefield, the next one you play will deal 4, 5, 6, 7, and you can use this effect as a win condition and just ping down your opponent's life totals, or you can even target the damage at any problematic creature on the battlefield and use it as a removal tool. And obviously this card has a really crazy synergy with the previous card, because you can just keep bouncing a single changeling back to your hand, casting it over and over again for barely any mana, and every time you do so you will get to ping a huge amount of damage. Risen Reef, the best tribal card in existence, and that is due to its really explosive effect. Whenever this creature or any other elemental enters the battlefield under your control, you get to reveal the top card of your library. If it is a land card, you get to put it on the battlefield tapped, accelerating your mana, and if it is a non-land card, you just get to put it in your hand, essentially drawing it. First up, there's nothing to be lost, because if you just play a Risen Reef and you don't follow up with any other creatures, it already sort of replaced itself as a cantrip. But if you are able to resolve this creature and your opponents don't have any answer available, and you are able to start following up with changelings, the value this card generates you is just beyond belief. You will never run out of cards in your hand anymore, and you will end up with like 10, 15, 20 lands on the battlefield. And let me just give you a little tip, whether it is you playing against a changeling deck or an ashling elemental deck, whenever a Risen Reef enters the battlefield, do everything in your power to remove it as quickly as possible, because this little card can absolutely take over a game all by itself. Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow, probably one of the most potent and popular tribal commanders out there, and that is for good reason. Yuriko has the ninjutsu ability, meaning instead of casting her for her regular mana cost, you can return an unblocked attacker you control to your hand, and then for just 2 mana you get to put Yuriko tapped and attacking on the battlefield. And this ability is just fantastic to get her on the battlefield tapped and attacking from as early as turn 2, because thanks to Dragon's cost cost reduction ability, you will always be able to play a Changeling on turn 1. And the fact that she comes in tapped and attacking is actually quite relevant because it will trigger her last passive ability. Whenever any ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to reveal the top card of your library and each opponent will take damage equal to the converted mana cost of the revealed card. And then you get to put that card in your hand. Now this ability is completely broken for a couple of reasons. First up, it does act in the same way as Bident of Tassa. Whenever we now connect with any of our changelings, we will get to draw a card. And since we do play cards like a Cloud Shredder Sliver that will give all of our changelings both flying and haste, we will easily be able to trigger this ability and just keep our hand filled. And on top of that, this ability also puts a huge amount of pressure on your opponent's life totals and you can use Yuriko as a win condition. I mean, the nice little bits of damage you deal whenever you hit some cheap cards off the top is pretty nice, but just imagine you hitting a Reaper King from this effect and dealing a total of 10 damage to each opponent. Knight Exemplar, a 3 mana first strike creature that will give all other knights you control a +1/+1 stat boost and indestructible. And since all of our changelings are also knights, this is just the perfect card to go tutor up once your board state is established, making it nearly impossible for your opponents to use any sort of board wipe or any sort of spot removal. Possibility Technician, a card that got me really excited to start building a Kavu tribal deck when I saw it revealed during Edge of Eternity spoiler season. But sadly, a Kavu tribal deck just isn't possible. But I am really happy that I finally found a deck I can play this card in. Whenever this creature or any other Kavu would enter the battlefield under your control, you get to exile the top card of your library. And for as long as you do control any Kavu, you can play that card from exile. And this ability just generates you some insane card advantage. You can just play this card, then follow up with like 5 changelings. You will then get to exile the top 5 cards of your library and you will essentially have drawn 5 cards. Because even if you don't have this creature on the battlefield anymore, you will still be able to cast those cards if you just have 1 changeling on the field. Those cards will never be lost. And on top of that, this card also has the warp mechanic, meaning you can cast it for 2 mana instead of paying its regular mana cost. It will then enter the battlefield, it will trigger, and then it will get exiled at the end of the turn. On a later turn, you can just cast it straight from exile by paying its regular mana cost, allowing us to just start any of our turns where we are about to play a huge amount of changelings with this effect, and essentially giving us 2 uses out of this card. Harmonic Sliver, a 3 mana creature with exactly the same effect as an Aura Shard, and they even made that card into a game changer due to its effect being this oppressive. Whenever any sliver enters the battlefield, you get to destroy target artifact or enchantment. With the amount of changelings we are playing, this effect can set your opponents back into the Stone Age. You can destroy any of their mana rocks, any of their artifact creatures, and you can even use this effect to deal with any problematic enchantment like Heuristic Studies or a Smothering Tide. Just be warned that this effect is not a May trigger, and whenever any sliver enters, you will have to destroy an artifact or enchantment. And if your opponents don't control any of those, you will have to pick your own cards. Hakon, Stormgall Scourge. For as long as Hakon is on the battlefield, we are allowed to cast any knight card straight from our graveyard. And this is obviously one of the strongest recursion effects in existence, because we will just be able to recast any changeling we lost during combat that got removed by any sort of removal or a board wipe, or even changelings that ended up in our graveyard by being milled. Now this really potent effect does come with a downside, and that is that we can only cast Hakon from our graveyard and not from anywhere else. So if you do have a Hakon in your hand, you won't actually be able to cast it. But as you will see later, we do play a ton of ways to sort of bypass this restriction. Hagbal of the Surging Soul, a Recon commander that when it got released put Merfolk back on the map again. Passively at the beginning of combat on your turn, every Merfolk you control, including Hagbal himself, will explore, meaning you get to reveal the top card of your library, and if it is a land card you get to put it into your hand, and if it isn't the land card you get to put a +1/+1 counter on the creature that explored, and then you can either choose to put the card back on top or put it into your graveyard. A really nice ability that will give you some sort of pseudo card draw, or it will allow you to manipulate the top cards of your library. And it's also a really nice way to get your Hakon into the graveyard. Now the Explore ability alone would already be more than enough reason to include Hakbal in the deck. But on top of that, whenever Hakbal attacks, you get the option to put a land card from your hand on the battlefield, and if you don't, you get to draw a card, giving you the option to just accelerate your mana for free or to just draw an additional card. Sit, Timeless Artificer. For 4 mana, you get a creature that will give all artifact creatures and heroes you control a +1/+1 stat boost for each Artificer card on the battlefield or in your graveyard. And Sit is basically our version of a coat of arms. Because your Changelings will both be heroes and artificers, they will get a +1/+1 stat boost for each Changeling you have on the battlefield or in your graveyard, just boosting their base stats through the roof to like 10-10 or 15-15, and you will be able to use Sit as a win condition in this deck. And the fact that this ability also scales from any Changeling you have in the graveyard makes it even better, because the longer the game goes on, the more Changelings will be in your graveyard, either due to being removed or due to us ditching them to effects like Hakbal's Explore. And this card also has the cycling mechanic, meaning you can pay 2 mana, discard Sit, and draw a new card. So if you don't have a big number of Changelings on the board yet and you don't need this effect, you can just make it replace itself, and then on a later turn, whenever you do have a gazillion Changelings on the board, you can just recur this card with something like a Hakon and go for a lethal swing on your opponents. Scourge of Valkas, a dragon body with exactly the same effect as a Dragon Tempest. Whenever any dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you get to ping X damage to any target, X being the amount of dragons you control. Like I mentioned, you can use this both as a removal tool or as a way to just close out the game and ping out your opponent's life totals. And when you already have a couple of Changelings on the board, when this creature enters, you will get immediate value, because you will even get a trigger when this creature enters. And fun fact, thanks to this card being a dragon, the cost reduction of Dragon will apply, and you will be able to cast this for 4 mana. Voja, Jaws of the Conclave, a massive 5/5 Vigilance Trample War 3 body that whenever it attacks will put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, X being the amount of elves you control, and it will also draw you a card for each wolf you control, including Voja itself. Now Voja is an absolutely insane card in any sort of elf or any sort of wolf deck, but thanks to all of our Changelings having both of those creature types at the same time, we will always get both parts of its ability per Changeling. So whenever you attack with your Voja and you have 5 Changelings on the battlefield, all creatures you control will get a massive 5 +1/+1 counters, and you will get to draw 6 cards, which is some pretty insane value. Belakor, the Dark Master, a 6 mana flying demon that whenever it enters the battlefield will check how many demons you control. Then for each demon you do control, you will get to draw 1 card at the cost of 1 life. Now usually by the time this card comes down, you will have like 2, 3, 4 Changelings on the battlefield, and you will get a really solid amount of card advantage. And in addition to that, whenever any other demon enters the battlefield under your control, you will get to deal X damage to any target on the battlefield, X being that demon's power. Now while this damage ping effect is not as good as a Dragon Tempest or a Scourge of Valkas due to our Changelings having a really low base power, whenever you do have a Sit on the battlefield and your Changelings have like 10 power, whenever you now play any of them, you will get to deal a huge chunk of damage to either an opponent or any creature on the battlefield. Trimming Hive Pool, a massive 6 mana artifact with affinity for slivers, meaning its cost will be reduced by 1 generic mana for each sliver you control. Now thanks to all of the slivers and the huge amount of Changelings we are playing, you can usually cast this card for like 2 to 3 mana. And whenever it is on the battlefield, it will give all slivers and Changelings you control both double strike and haste. The haste will, just like a Cloud Shredder sliver, enable us to instantly use any ability and instantly swing with any Changeling we play, and a double strike will enable us to deal massive amount of damage when we have any of our lords that give a stat boost on the battlefield. We will just instantly be able to win the game whenever we do have a Sit and a couple of Changelings on the field, and it will make our creatures deal combat damage twice and give us double the Yuriko triggers. And on top of that, at the beginning of our upkeep, we also get to generate 2 1/1 sliver tokens, which will also have haste and double strike. And as you will see later, we do have ways to turn those sliver tokens into changelings and make them benefit from any of the tribal synergies we play in this deck. Titan of Lijaga. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield, we get to choose a creature type, and this creature will be the chosen type in addition to its other types, essentially making it function in the same way as a changeling. You can just name the creature type that is the most relevant depending on whatever you have on the battlefield. If you have a Risen Reef, you will name Elemental. If you have a Belakor, you will name Demon. And if you have a Possibility Technician, you will obviously name Kavu. And whenever this creature either enters a battlefield or it attacks, you get to draw a card for each creature card that shares a type with it. Now obviously with all of the changelings we are playing, this effect will always draw you a massive amount of cards. And this card will just do it over and over again every single turn for as long as it remains on the battlefield. The fact that we do have to discard one single card is actually a benefit for us because it does give us a really nice way to get our Hakon from our hand into our graveyard. Unesh, Cryosphinx Sovereign. This 6 mana body will passively reduce the cost of any Sphinx spell you play by 2 generic mana, which I suppose is quite nice with our changelings, but usually we don't really need this effect, because thanks to Dragon's cost reduction ability, our changelings will just cost us colored mana and they will barely have any sort of generic mana cost. The reason this card is included in the deck is because whenever Unesh or any other Sphinx we control enters the battlefield, we get a free fact or fiction effect, meaning we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our library, pick an opponent, and that opponent has to divide those 4 cards into 2 different piles. Then we get to put one of those piles into our hand and one in our graveyard. This sort of effect just allows you to dig incredibly deep into your library. Due to you being able to pick the pile that goes to your hand, you will always be able to pick the card you need most, no matter how your opponents do divide the piles. And obviously whenever you play a changeling, you will just get to repeat this effect over and over again, resulting in some insane card draw. And just like the previous card, this type of effect is a really good way to ensure that you can get your Hakon into your graveyard. And the last card in this section is the creature I wanted to use as the original commander of this deck, Reaper King, a card that has the strongest tribal effect ever printed. But to keep that ability from being absolutely broken, it is locked into one of the weakest tribes in Magic, Scarecrows. And honestly, the ability is really simple. Whenever any Scarecrow enters the battlefield under your control, you get to destroy target permanent. Yeah, you heard me right. Any permanent, even lands. So just like a Harmonic Sliver, you can use this effect to deal with any sort of artifact or enchantment. Whenever you play a changeling, you just get to remove any creature on the field. And whenever you get into the late game and you are able to play like 5, 6, 7 changelings in a single turn, you get the ability to just destroy all lands that any specific player controls, just totally locking them out of the game. Next up, we have the acceleration section. Before we can start chaining all of our tribal triggers together, we need to get our engine online. These cards will help us fix our 5-color mana, they will turn all of our changelings into mana dorks, and they will allow us to cast all of the expensive spells in this deck way earlier than we should. Gemhide and Mana Weft Sliver. Both creatures have different names, but they have exactly the same effect, and that is that they will turn all slivers and changelings we control into birds of paradise, allowing us to tap them for 1 mana of any color, which will allow us to generate a huge amount of mana, and it will help fix all 5 of our colors. And cards like this make this deck really explosive. You can just play a huge amount of changelings on the first turns of the game, and you will have access to like 7, 8, 9, 10 mana really early in the game. And like I mentioned, when you combine these with any of our haste enablers like a Cloud Shredder Sliver or a Trimming Hive Pool, you can just play any changeling and you will instantly be able to tap it for mana and follow up with even more cards. Great Divide Guide, the most handsome old man we got in the Avatar set. And this card has a really similar ability to the previous 2 cards. And that is that he will turn all of our allies and changelings into birds of paradise. But on top of that, he will also give this ability to all of our lands. Since we are a budget deck, this ability really helps us out, allowing us to tap our land for any of our colors. course, Harabas Druid, a 2-mana creature that you can tap to add X mana of any color to your mana pool, X being the amount of allies you control. Now baseline, this already functions as a 2-mana mana dork because it is an ally itself and it will always tap for at least 1 mana. But once you are able to get a couple of changelings on the board, you will be able to tap this card for 1 mana plus 1 for each changeling you control. Magda, Brazen Outlaw, another really fantastic tribal lord with some really broken abilities, but it is balanced out by being locked into a fringe tribe like dwarves. First up, she will give all her dwarf and changeling creatures a nice +1 power boost, which might actually be quite relevant when you combine it with cards like Bellaker. The second and the most broken ability will generate you an untapped treasure token whenever any dwarf you control becomes tapped for any reason whatsoever. Yeah, this ability is just busted, because now whenever you attack with any of your changelings, or whenever you tap them for mana by using a mana weft sliver, you will get to generate an additional treasure token per changeling. And thanks to the treasures coming in untapped, you will immediately be able to use them. It's really hard for me to explain how potent this ability is without showing you any gameplay footage, but trust me, this is the best mana generator in the entire deck. Usually whenever you can get this on the battlefield and it sticks around for a couple of turns, it will generate you like 10 to 20 treasure tokens. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Magda doesn't even stop there, because she even has another activated ability that is just perfect for this type of changeling deck. We get the ability to sacrifice 5 treasure tokens on instant speed, and then we get to search our library for any sort of dragon or artifact card and put it straight into play. You can use this to just go tutor up any changeling in the deck, because those are also dragons. You can go tutor up your Scourge of Valkas as a win con, and you can even use it to go fetch up your Thrumming Hive pool. And honestly, those aren't even the best targets. Trust me, the best is yet to come in this video. Springleaf Parade. In my opinion, one of the strongest cards we got in the entire Lorwyn set. For 2 green mana plus X, you get to generate X/1/1 changeling tokens. And passively, all creature tokens you control will get the ability that you can tap them to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Now you can use this card in 2 different ways. You can cast it early in the game to just get some changelings into play and accelerate your mana, or later in the game when you are able to pump like 12 mana into the spell and generate 10 changeling tokens, it can just win you the game on the spot. You will get a huge amount of card draw and acceleration from your Risen Reef, a massive amount of damage from your Dragon Tempest. You will get to destroy 10 permanents with your Reaper King. All of them will get a +11/+11 stat boost thanks to Sid, or you will just be able to clear the board by fighting with your Ayula. And there are many more examples of how good generating a huge amount of changelings in one spell is in this deck. Virdog Core, a 3-mana artifact that we can tap for 1 mana of any color. And thanks to this card having the changeling ability, its cost will actually be reduced by the Dragon, making this card into a tribal version of an arcane signet that will trigger any sort of tribal synergy we play in this deck. And for 4 mana, you can animate this artifact into a 4/4 changeling creature, which you can use as a body to swing with Double Strike, get some Yuriko triggers, and even when this card isn't animated, whenever you do tap it for mana, you will get to generate the treasure of your Magda, because it is always a dwarf even though it isn't a creature. Muera, Trash Tactician, a 3-mana creature that passively at the beginning of your first main phase will add 1 red or green mana to your mana pool for each raccoon you control, including herself. And this ability is just fantastic. You don't even have to do anything for it. Just have some changelings on the battlefield and you will get free mana every single turn over and over again. And this little raccoon also has 2 expand abilities, meaning that whenever you do spend 4 mana to cast spells during your own turn, you will get to gain 3 life, and whenever you spend 8 mana during your turns on spells, you will get to exile the top 2 cards of your library and you will be able to play them until the end of the next turn, making it act as a really solid mana engine. It will gain you little bits of life and it will give you a really solid stream of card advantage. And I mean, who doesn't like playing raccoons? If you like these in-depth deck tech videos and you want to support me and my little changeling, check out the YouTube membership program. Members will get early access to the deck lists, exclusive Discord chat rooms where I'm always sharing what projects I'm currently working on weeks before the videos even go live, and of course that glorious Panzer helmet next to your name on YouTube. And obviously a big big thanks to everyone who is already supporting the channel. Thanks to you, I can keep doing what I love doing most and pouring all of my love and passion for Magic into these weekly deck tech videos. And if you ever want to be part of an awesome Magic community outside of YouTube, I'd really recommend you coming and checking out the Panzer MTG Discord, which is where we have some of the best deck builders on the entire planet. We are helping each other optimize our decks, talking about new spoilers, and we also have a really good memes channel. If you want to support or come check out the Discord, both links can be found in the description below. Alright, now let's get into the backbone of this deck, the Changelings. Without these creatures that count as any creature type, this deck simply wouldn't exist. And just keep in mind that every single one of these creatures is a dragon and will have its cost reduced by 1 mana thanks to the Dragon. Smoothest Changeling. By tapping an untapped creature we control, we get to give this card flying until the end of turn, making it into a really evasive body that we can use to get extra Yu-Gi-Oh triggers. And since this ability isn't limited to tapping one creature, we can just tap any Changeling we control with Magda on the battlefield and we will get to generate a huge amount of treasures without even having to attack with them. Universal Automaton. A Changeling creature that we can cast for 0 mana thanks to the Dragon. Now obviously this is a really efficient effect. You can just play any of your tribal synergy cards and instantly follow up with this card to generate you value. But where this card gets absolutely out of control is whenever you combine it with Hibernation Sliver. Because let's say you do have the Sliver and a Scourge of Valkas or a Risen Reef on the battlefield, you can just keep bouncing this card back to your hand, casting it for free over and over again, and for as long as you do have the life remaining, you can get free triggers out of any of your tribal lords. An absolutely busted synergy. Ameboid Changeling. A card with the ability that you can tap it to give any target creature all creature types until the end of turn. And even though we are already a Changeling deck ourselves, this gives us the ability to turn all of our lords into actual Changelings, just giving us extra benefits. You can turn your Voya into a ninja to get Yu-Gi-Oh triggers of it. You can turn your Sith into a hero to get its own massive stat boost. You can turn your Dragon into a Sliver, making it swing for 20 damage when you have a Trimming Hive Pool on the battlefield. And whenever you do have a Knight Exemplar and a Risen Reef on the battlefield, you can turn your Risen Reef into a Knight, making it indestructible and impossible for your opponents to deal with. The applications of this effect are really endless. Masked Vandal. For 1 mana you get a Changeling body that whenever it enters a battlefield gives you the option to exile a creature card from your graveyard. When you do, you get to exile any sort of artifact or enchantments that your opponents control. A really cost-efficient Changeling body that also doubles up as an interaction piece. Shapesharer. For 3 mana we can make target shapeshifter into a copy of any creature on the battlefield, which allows us to just make all of our Changelings into copy of any non-legendary value creature we control, like a Risen Reef, a Scourge of Valkas, or even a Titan of Lijaga. And this effect isn't even limited to creatures we control. So if you are playing against a Krenko player, you can turn any of your Changelings into a Krenko and you will be able to generate a massive amount of goblins. Stalactite Dagger. A 2 mana equipment that whenever it enters the battlefield will generate you a 1/1 Changeling token, already giving its own Changeling body, and whenever we do equip this card to any creature it will also get the Changeling ability, making it become all creature types. And just like I mentioned with the previous cards, the fact that you do get the ability to turn all of your tribal lords into Changelings is really busted. 3/3 Mascot. A simple Changeling we can cast for 1 colorless mana that will help us with our color fixing in this deck. Nothing fancy, but really consistent. Unsettled Mariner. A 2 mana Changeling that will give all permanents you control and you yourself as a player Ward 1. And this is probably one of the strongest Changelings in existence, because it will make it really hard for your opponents to target anything on your board with spot removal. And if you, for example, are playing against a Storm player who is trying to resolve 10 copies of his Grapeshot targeted at you, they will have to pay 1 generic mana per trigger or the ability will just get countered. Changeling Wayfinder. For 2 mana we get a creature that whenever it enters a battlefield will allow us to search our library for any basic land and put it into our hand, both thinning our deck by getting the basic lands out of it and making sure that we won't miss a land drop on the next turn. Chomping Changeling. A card that just like a Masked Vandal will allow us to deal with any sort of artifact or enchantment when it enters, and this time we don't even have to exile a card from our graveyard to do so. Block Imposter. Panzer, a flying changeling we can cast on instant speed, and whenever it enters the battlefield we get to return one creature we control to our hand, which is an effect you can use to protect any of your value cards from being removed by spot removal or board wipes, or you can use it to just bounce any cheap changeling back to your hand, recast it again, and get additional ETB triggers. Formless Genesis, a 3 mana sorcery with the Changeling ability, meaning we can cast it for 2 mana thanks to the Dragon. And whenever we cast it, we get to generate a Changeling token with X power and X toughness, X being the amount of land cards in our graveyard. Now usually the first time you cast this, you will get a 0/0 Changeling token because we're not playing any sort of fetch lands and it's really hard to get lands into our graveyard. That being said, the Changeling will still enter the battlefield, give you any triggers, and if you do have any stat boosting lord on the field, it will get its stat boosted and it won't actually die. And the best part about this card is that it has the retrace ability, meaning that whenever it is in your graveyard, you can cast it from there by just discarding any land card, synergizing really well with its first ability to just get lands into your own graveyard, and also giving you a really nice way to just keep generating Changeling tokens over and over again in the late game by just discarding any land cards you don't need anymore. Scaling really well with all of the land cards you will draw of Hakbal's Explore ability, and whenever you do have a Hakon on the battlefield, you can just recast this card over and over again from your graveyard by just paying its mana cost and not discarding a land card, because this card is also a night spell. Mirror Entity. By paying X generic mana, we can make all of our creatures have base stats XX until the end of turn. And especially in the late game when you have a huge amount of mana available thanks to things like a Great Divide Guide or a Mana Weft Sliver, you can use this as a win con to just boost your creature stats by a huge amount and go for a huge combat swing. On top of that, whenever you do activate this ability, no matter what the value for the X is, all creatures you control will turn into Changelings, making all of your creatures give you Yugiko triggers, all of them will gain haste and double strike thanks to your Trimming Hive pool, and everything will get a massive stat boost thanks to Sit. Mutable Explorer. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield, you get to generate a tapped Mutavault token. A Mutavault being a land that taps for a colorless mana, and for 1 generic mana you can animate it into a 2/2 Changeling token. And thanks to the Dragon's cost reduction applying to this card, we get a really solid way to accelerate our mana from as early as turn 2. And obviously the fact that we can animate a Mutavault into an additional Changeling will also have some really good synergies in this deck. Realm Walker. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield, we get to choose a creature type. And for as long as this card is on the battlefield, we get to look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can actually play cards from the chosen creature type straight from the top of our library, allowing us to play with 1 additional card in our hand for as long as the top card matches the creature type, which obviously all of our Changelings will do. Tarian Mauler. Whenever any opponent casts any spell, we get to put a +1/+1 counter onto this Changeling, making this into a body that at some point in the game your opponents will just have to deal with, otherwise its stats will just grow completely out of control. Graveshifter. Whenever this Changeling enters the battlefield, we get to return any creature card from our graveyard to our hand. A fantastic way to recur any value creature that ended up in your graveyard over the course of the game. Irregular Cohort. A creature that will enter the battlefield accompanied by a 2/2 Changeling token, giving you 2 Changeling bodies and double the triggers on 1 single card. And the last and one of the best Changelings in existence is an Omni Changeling, which has the Convoke mechanic, meaning whenever we cast it, we get the ability to tap any creature we control to help pay for its mana cost, which, keep in mind, thanks to the Dragon, will only be 4 mana. Since we are a creature heavy deck, we will always have bodies on the field to cast this card for barely any mana. And the Convoke ability also scales really well with Magda, giving you a treasure token for each Changeling that you use to convoke this card. When it enters, you can turn this creature into a copy of any creature on the battlefield. And in addition, it will even retain its own Changeling ability, giving you a double possibility technician, making your entire board indestructible by doubling up on Night Exemplar, and even functioning as a second copy of Risen Reef, which will trigger the original Risen Reef when it enters. Next up, we have the support section. These are the cards that keep everything in this deck running smoothly. They add consistency, open up additional synergies, help us find key creatures, interact with our opponents when needed, and they even give us additional ways to close out the game. Kataran Summons. For 1 black mana we get to search our library for any mercenary card and put it into our hand. A really cost efficient way to just go tutor up any specific changeling you need most at the current given board state. You can go get your Omni Changeling if you want to start copying, your Masked Vandal if you have to deal with any sort of artifact or enchantment, and you can even use this on non-creature tribal spells, so you can use this to go tutor up your Formless Genesis later in the game. Celestial Reunion. For 1 green mana plus X you get to search your library for any creature card with mana value X or less and put it into your hand. And whenever you cast it you also get the option to select a creature type and behold 2 creatures of that type. Meaning you just have to select 2 creatures of that type in your hand or on the battlefield. Nothing actually happens to those creatures, you just have to have them available. And whenever the additional cost is paid, the card you tutored up won't go to your hand, but you get to put it on the battlefield instead. Now thanks to us being a changeling deck, we will always have 2 cards available either in our hand or on the field of any given type, making this into a card that will just tutor straight to the battlefield. You can tutor up your Hakon to the battlefield and start recurring anything in your graveyard. You can go fetch up your Hibernation Sliver to set up some lines with your Universal Automaton, or you can just select 2 wolves, go tutor up your Voja and start closing out the game. Lively Dirge, a 2 mana card with the spree mechanic, meaning you get to choose any of its additional modes, and whenever you do pay the mana cost for it, that effect will apply. For 1 additional generic mana you get to search your library for a creature card and put it into your graveyard, which is the most reliable way to make sure you can get your Hakon into your graveyard. And that's honestly the main reason why this card is included in the deck. By paying 2 additional generic mana you get to return up to 2 creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield with a total combined mana cost of 4, making it function as a really solid recursion piece to just reanimate 2 of your cheap changeling bodies from your grave to the battlefield and get some tribal triggers. And the best part about the spree mechanic is the fact that you can pay the mana and get both options at once, enabling you to go search your library for anything that costs 4 or less, ditch it into your graveyard, and then instantly reanimating it. TARDIS, a 2 mana flying vehicle with crew 2, that whenever this card attacks and you do control a creature with the Time Lord typing, will give the next spell you cast this turn Cascade, meaning you get to flip the top cards of your library until you hit a spell with a lesser mana value, and then you get to cast that spell for free. And like most of you know, Cascade is just an absolutely broken mechanic that will give you free value. And thanks to us being a changeling deck, we will always have a Time Lord on the battlefield, and we will be able to trigger this card's effect every single turn. A really cool interaction with the crew mechanic is the fact that you can tap any amount of creatures to crew this vehicle. Then whenever you do have a Magda and a couple of changelings on the battlefield, you will get to generate a huge amount of treasure tokens without even ever having to attack with those creatures. Personify, a 2 mana instant speed spell that will allow us to blink a creature, meaning it will leave the battlefield and then instantly re-enter again. And this effect can be used in 2 different ways. If any of your opponents are trying to cast a spot removal spell on your Knight Exemplar, you can just cast a spell, make it disappear, re-enter again, and the spot removal spell will fizzle. And you can also use it to get another ETB trigger out of any creature we play in the deck, like your Risen Reef, your Scourge of Valkas, or your Belagor. And after the blink effect resolved, you even get to generate a 1/1 Changeling token, giving you even more triggers. Nameless Inversion, an instant speed Changeling spell that will give target creature +3 power and -3 toughness until the end of turn. And thanks to this being a Changeling, it will only cost you 1 black mana thanks to the Dragon, acting as a really solid spot removal spell you can use early in the game to get rid of any low cost value creatures. And we are also using this card in our softlock combo, but more about that later. And now that we're on the topic of really efficient kindred removal spells, Crypt Swap. For just 2 mana you get to exile any creature on the battlefield, but in return that creature's controller will get to generate a 1/1 Changeling token. Yeah, this is basically the kindred version of a Swords to Plowshares or a Path to Exile, just allowing you to deal with any problematic creature on instant speed for barely any mana. And thanks to this spell having the Changeling ability, you can even use a Kataran Summons to go tutor it up if you do need a removal spell. Exterminate, a 3-mana sorcery that will destroy any creature on the battlefield and make its controller lose 3 life. But the best part about this card is that it has the replicate mechanic, meaning whenever we cast it, we get to tap any amount of untapped Dalek we control, and for any Dalek we tapped, we get to copy this spell. Now usually with a huge amount of changelings you will have on the battlefield, this card will act as a one-sided board wipe, just allowing you to destroy like 5, 6, 7 creatures on the battlefield, and in the process also taking a huge chunk of life out of your opponent's life totals. Flame of Honor. For 3 mana on instant speed, you get a spell that will allow you to choose one out of its 3 options. You can make target player draw 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or deal 5 damage to any creature. And whenever you do cast a spell with a wizard on the battlefield, you actually get to pick 2 out of its 3 options. And the amount of versatility that this card gives you is just incredible, giving you the option to deal with any problematic artifact or creature on the battlefield, while also drawing you 2 cards in the process. Black Market Connections, the most expensive card in this entire deck, and that is for good reason. It's a 3 mana enchantment that at the beginning of your first main phase will allow you to pick 1 or more out of its 3 options. The first option will allow you to generate a treasure token at the cost of 1 life, accelerating your mana. The second option will allow you to draw a card for 2 life, giving you a really solid stream of card advantage. And the third option will allow you to generate a 3/2 changeling token at the cost of 3 life. Now most decks that are in black are already including this card, and that is because of its first really 2 solid abilities. But in this deck where we can actually get a huge amount of benefits out of the changeling token, this card is even better. Loyal Inventor, a 3 mana creature that whenever it enters the battlefield allows you to search your library for any artifact card and put it on top. But if you do control an assassin, when this effect resolves, you get to put that card straight into your hand. And obviously, since we will always be controlling an assassin, this is one of the most efficient artifact tutors in the entire deck. A really good way to go tutor up your Trimming Hive Pool, your Reaper King, or the best artifact in this entire deck, which is the next card, a Moskwood Nexus, which will turn all creatures you control both on the battlefield or in any other zone into changelings, giving them all creature types. And this effect is just broken in this deck because everything will now be a changeling. Let me just give you a couple of examples. You will now be able to use your Katakan summons to go tutor up any card in the deck. Whenever you now have an Unesh on the battlefield, its 2 generic cost reduction will apply to any creature in the deck. Since everything is a dragon, the Ur Dragon's cost reduction will now also apply to everything in the deck. And you will even be able to use Magda's treasure sacrificing ability to just go tutor up any sort of creature in this deck. And there are way more applications to a Moskwood Nexus. I could honestly make a 3-hour video talking about how good this card is. And on top of its fantastic passive ability, we also get the option to pay 3 mana, tap this artifact and generate us a changeling token, making this card even better. Peer Pressure, a 4 mana sorcery that makes us choose a creature type whenever we cast it. And if we control more creatures of the chosen type than any opponent, we get to gain control of all creatures of the chosen type on the battlefield. And let me just explain to you how you can use this effect. If you are playing against a lot of green players who have a ton of elf mana dorks on the battlefield, you can just name elf, and thanks to us always controlling a huge amount of changelings and more elves than any of our opponents, we will get to gain control of those creatures, giving us access to a huge amount of mana dorks and just ruining our opponent's game plans. Later in the game, if your opponents have 2 big dragons on the battlefield, you can just name dragon, and if you control 3 changelings, you will get to gain control of those massive dragons. And even if you are playing against a Balin player, you can just name rabbit, you will get to gain control of their commander. For as long as it stays on the battlefield, their entire deck is just shut down, because they won't have a way to ever get their commander back. And a funny thing you can do is use an Amoeboid Changeling to change any creature your opponents control into a specific type, and you will get to steal it away with this spell. Liliana's Contract, a 5 mana enchantment that whenever it enters the battlefield will draw you 4 cards at the cost of 4 life, which I suppose isn't the most horrible deal to just refill your hand in the late game. But the main reason why this card is included in the deck is its last passive ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you do control 4 or more demons with different names, you instantly win the game. And due to all of our changelings being demons, this card essentially reads: control 4 non-token shapeshifters and you will just instantly win the game if an opponent isn't able to deal with this effect. This card is basically just a skill check for your playgroup to test if they are playing enough enchantment removal. Hellkite Courser, a 5 mana creature that whenever it enters the battlefield allows us to put any commander from the command zone on the battlefield and it will gain haste until the end of turn. Yeah, being able to get our massive 9 mana commander into play for just 5 mana is absolutely nuts. Especially to this card giving haste, we will even instantly be able to swing with it and draw us an additional card in the process. And if you do remember from earlier in the video when I was talking about Magda, this is by far the best dragon target to go tutor up with your treasure tokens, because you will both get a massive dragon body and a free dragon entering the battlefield. Summon Leviathan, a 6 mana enchantment creature saga that, as you could have guessed, functions in the same way as an actual saga. Whenever it enters the battlefield, it will bounce any creature that's not a kraken, a leviathan, a merfolk, a serpent, or an octopus. And the chances that your opponents control anything of these types are really slim, making this function as a one-sided bounce effect that will bounce anything but your changelings. Now, just having a hard board reset button on a big creature is already really solid. But the saga also has another ability that will trigger on both its second and its third stage. Until the end of turn, whenever any of the set creature types do attack, you get to draw a card, which will trigger whenever this creature itself attacks and whenever you attack with any changelings. You just have to attack and you don't even have to deal combat damage to draw a gazillion cards of this effect. And the last card in this section is Amorphon the Boundless, a classic creature that is used as a changeling commander in some decks. Whenever it enters a battlefield, we have to choose a creature type, and any creature of the chosen type will get a +1/+1 stat boost, which is pretty okay, I suppose. But what makes this card totally broken in a changeling deck is its other ability. All spells we cast of the chosen type will have their cost reduced by 1 mana of any color. This cost reduction will only apply to colored mana pips and not to generic mana. Yeah, this ability is just busted. It will enable us to cast the Dragon for just 4 generic mana, which is just nuts. It will remove all the colored mana our changeling cost and we will be able to cast them for 0 mana, making all of them act as a universal automaton. And this effect will even allow you to cast your Reaper King for absolutely free. Amorphon is also the last combo piece we need to set up some sort of a soft lock, and let me just explain how it works. For this combo you will need 3 things. You will need a Hakon and Amorphon on the battlefield, and you will need a Nameless Inversion either in your graveyard or in your hand. Thanks to Dragon in the command zone, Nameless Inversion will only cost you 1 black mana, which will be reduced even further to 0 mana thanks to us controlling Amorphon, essentially making us able to cast that spell for free. Thanks to Nameless Inversion having the changeling typing and being a knight, we will just be able to recast it from our graveyard, give any creature our opponents control -3 toughness, the spell will then just go back to our graveyard, and we will just be able to keep repeating the loop and doing it over and over again until our opponents don't control any creatures anymore. And since we can cast Nameless Inversion on instant speed whenever your opponents do play a new creature, you can just cast it again and instantly remove it, just totally locking your opponents out of ever controlling any creatures. And last up we have the lands. Since we are running a budget €150 5 color deck, I had to get a little creative here. The mana base I chose will get the job done just fine, but you can always upgrade it and make it more consistent by playing things like fetch lands, shock lands, bond Taunt lands, a City of Brass, a Mana Confluence. We are running a huge amount of utility lands. I'll start by going over those. Abundant Countryside, a land that will tap for any color as long as we spend that mana on a creature spell, and by paying 6 mana and tapping this land we get to generate a 1/1 Changeling token. A really nice ability that will allow us to convert any leftover mana we have in the late game into extra Changeling tokens and extra tribal triggers. Ally Encampment, a land that will tap for a colorless mana or 1 mana of any color if we spend it on an ally spell. And as you will see, we are playing many more lands with exactly this effect. The reason being that it gives us access to all 5 of our colors for as long as we are spending that mana on any of our changelings, because they will always match the required type. And this land also has a fantastic utility ability. For 1 mana and sacrificing it, we get to return any ally we control to our hand, which we can use as a protection tool for any of our valuable changelings, or we can use to bounce and replay a changeling and get additional triggers. Haven of the Spirit Dragon. For 2 mana, tapping and sacrificing this land, we get to return any sort of dragon spell from our graveyard to our hand. Another really nice recursion ability that will allow us to get our Scourge of Vel'Kas, our Hellkite Courser, or any of our changelings back from our graveyard to our hand. Maelstrom of the Spirit Dragon. Instead of recurring a dragon, this time for 4 mana, tapping and sacrificing it, we get to search our library for any dragon card and put it into our hand. A dragon/changeling tutor we get on a land. Mutavault. Just like I explained when I was talking about Mutable Explorer, it's a land that will tap for 1 colorless mana, and for 1 generic mana we can animate it into a 2/2 changeling, which you can use to get extra demons on the battlefield, get some additional Yu-Gi-Oh triggers, or you can even tap it for a colorless mana, use that mana to animate itself, and you will even be able to get an additional Hagbal trigger out of it. Pot of Ancestry, a tap land that will tap for 1 mana of any color, and whenever we either cast a changeling or a dragon spell, we will now get to scry 1, which in this deck is actually quite nice with the amount of changelings we'll be casting, and you will be allowed to manipulate the top cards of your library, setting up your draws for your future turns. Swarmyard, a land you can tap to protect and regenerate any insect, rat, spider, or squirrel, which is a nice way to prevent any of your changelings from dying. And once you do have a Moskwood Nexus or an Amoeboid changeling on the battlefield, you can use this effect to protect your value pieces that aren't changelings. The World Tree, a land that will enter the battlefield tapped, and once you have 6 or more lands in play, all of your lands will get the ability that you can tap them for mana of any color, which is a really nice way to just ensure that we do have access to the colors we need most. And for a massive total of 10 mana, 2 in each color, we can sacrifice this land and search our library for any amount of god cards and put them onto the battlefield. Now once you do have access to a gazillion mana thanks to your mana weft sliver, you can use this ability to just go fetch up any changeling in the deck to the field. And just imagine you having a Moskwood Nexus on the battlefield when you resolve this effect. You can just pick up your deck like this and toss it on the table. And for the regular mana producing lands, we're playing a Command Tower, an Exotic Orchard, a Horizon of Progress, a Murmuring Bosk, a Reflecting Pool, a Secluded Courtyard, a Temple of the Dragon Queen, an Unclaimed Territory, an Urban Retreat, a Yavimaya, 3 of the Tribal Reveal lands, 5 3-color tap lands, and for basics we're playing 3 forests, 2 islands, 1 swamp, 1 mountain, and 1 plains. Now I already know the comment section is going to be filled with a ton of really awesome tribal card suggestions. When you build a tribal deck like this one, there is an immensely huge pool of cards to choose from. But at the end of the day, we only have a total of 99 slots to work with. So the video you just saw is just my personal version of the deck. There are obviously many more cards you can include. That being said, if you are curious about all the cards I considered when I was building this deck, you can go check it out over on Moxfield. You can just click the link to the deck in the description below, click the like button while you're there, scroll down to the considering section, click expand, and you will be able to see all the cards I ever considered for this build. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, let me know by dropping 5 different animal emojis in the comments below. Share this video with any Magic player you've ever met, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you won't miss next week's upload. Thanks for watching, enjoy abusing the strongest tribal lords in the entire game, and I will see you in the next one.